Welcome to Know Before You Go for the 18th Sunday in Ordinary Time. I'm Father Don Goergen. Our gospel text today is very apropos to the experiences that we ourselves are probably having, at least the challenge it presents. It begins with the Gospel of Matthew. When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew. His heart was moved. When Jesus heard about the death of this friend, the one who had baptized him, his mentor, deep grief entered into his heart and soul. Let's think for a moment in our own lives, recently, although it even doesn't have to be recently, of those moments of grief where we've sat with a loved one or not been able to sit with a loved one, when we lost someone tragically earlier in life than one would ever have expected. Indeed, there is that sense of loss, and not only loss of someone, but loss of mobility, loss of a sense of direction, loss perhaps of a job, employment, so many different ways in which we've experienced recently grief in a wide variety of ways. When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew. The natural response could be also for us to indeed withdraw, to withdraw into ourselves. But then what happens is that as Jesus attempts to find that solitude for himself, indeed others, the crowds, come and they're searching for something, for some word from him, perhaps just nourishment, because then it goes on and tells the story about the feeding of the 5,000. And it says that Jesus' heart was moved with pity or compassion for them. And he says to the other disciples, give them some food. In other words, what we find in the text is a movement from what could have been self-pity to a movement of compassion for others. Jesus grieved the loss of John the Baptist, but he didn't allow himself to wallow in that, to enter into self-pity, which we so easily can do, which I myself do at times. Why, Lord, me, does this have to happen in this way? But the challenge that was presented to Jesus, to which he responded, was to respond to the needs of others. So likewise, recently, the Catholic Health Association put out some little blurbs or ways of focusing our attention in this time of pandemic that simply said, love your neighbor, wear a mask. It had different expressions as well. But that's the movement from not being so focused on our own loss, which we do not want to ignore for sure. We do not want to focus only on our loss, but how out of that can I reach out and be responsive to others. I'm not a first responder, but in fact, all of us are first responders in one way or another to those who come into contact with us. Am I a source of comfort, of hope, of relief, of encouragement, of love, of something for those who enter into my life and my world during these days? How can I move from that focus on my loss to a focus on how I can be of help to others, to love of neighbor? What are the ways indeed in which I can manifest that love of neighbor? As the Catholic Hospital Association had put this out, of course, one way is for us to be sensitive, to wear masks, to wash our hands, to keep distance, all of these practices. But there may be many other ways: a phone call to someone, being in touch with someone, reassuring them, letting them know that we're there for them. Our first reading helps us in that regard. great text from the prophet Isaiah, which says, all who are thirsty, come to the water. All who are thirsty, certainly that means all of us, thirsty for relief, thirsty for the Lord, thirsty for love and companionship. All of us are thirsty. All who are thirsty, come to the water, come to the Lord. And in that, pondering what that water is, which so often in the New Testament, that water refers to the Holy Spirit. It can be the baptismal water in which we have been given that gift of the Holy Spirit. And so how do I move from that kind of self-pity to a moment in which I can really reach out and respond as a responder to others and not get self-absorbed by recalling that gift of the Holy Spirit who empowers me to be indeed my best self. Our second reading, Paul's letter to the Romans, says, nothing can separate us from the love of Jesus Christ. Let us take that with us this Sunday. Nothing, no matter how difficult, can actually separate us from the love of Christ. And if again I can be aware of that love, then I can love. I can move from that love God has for me to that love of neighbor, which is asked of all of us. So let us just ask ourselves, how can I love even more fully today than I perhaps think I'm capable of? How today will I love my neighbor? May you find your answer to that question.